Summer can be a bit of a slog. For us, it's often for some reason a rather busy time, and I'm sure we're not alone.
Well, you can beat the summertime sadness and the August angst and enhance your everyday with our excellent sponsor, Via Hemp. This is a company that crafts award-winning premium THC and THC-free gummies.
Each of these gummies is especially designed to cultivate a specific mood. Whether you're looking to get relaxed, get quality sleep, get creative, or just to get focused. If you're 21 or older, you can experience it for yourself and get 15% off your first order with our exclusive code MSheet at viahemp.com. That's VIIAHEMP.com.
I personally enjoyed their grapefruit flow state gummies. This CBG and CBD powerhouse really helped me tap into my productivity. Like, we have had an extremely busy summer, and I feel flow state got me over the finish line a few times when I was editing multiple episodes a day, digging through documents, and knocking out a bunch of interviews.
Via Hemp does not require a medical card, and it ships legally to all 50 states. It's also affordable, and even more so for Murder Sheet listeners who get a special deal.
If you're 21 and older, head to viahemp.com and use code MSheet to receive 15% off. That's VIIAHEMP.com and use code MSheet at checkout. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Enhance your everyday with Via.
Have you ever covered a carpet stain with a rug? Ignored a leaky faucet? Pretended your half-painted living room is supposed to look like that? Well, you're not alone. We've all got unfinished home projects. But there's an easier way. Thumbtack is the app that makes it easier to care for your home. Pull out your phone and in just a few taps, search, chat, and book highly rated pros right in your neighborhood. Download Thumbtack and start caring for your home the easier way.
This episode is sponsored by AutoTrader. Credit scores, down payments, interest rates. Car buying can be a numbers game, but you don't have to be a math expert to get the keys to your dream car. Just use Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on AutoTrader. Crunch your numbers and get your personalized results so you know exactly how much you'll pay each month for your car. It's like having a magic wand for your wallet. Presto! The car you've been wanting is now within reach. So hit the road and leave your calculator at home. Find your next car on autotrader.com.
Content warning. This episode contains discussion of topics related to addiction, drug use and abuse, and the death of a young man.
It's important to remember that Zachary Cain Biederstadt was still only starting out in life on that dark morning in January when it all ended. He was an animal lover, a loyal friend, a lovable son, grandchild, nephew, and cousin. He was gentle and funny and capable of insights that showed a wisdom beyond his years. He was only 19. He should have had time to figure everything out. Instead, unfortunately, he took a pill. That Percocet pill was laced with fentanyl. That fentanyl caused Zachary to overdose and die, leaving his family and friends in anguish. And the story gets even worse from there. The facts of how Zachary obtained that deadly pill came out slowly, but the truth did emerge. More lives would soon be shattered. Today, we're going to talk about Zachary. We'll talk about who he was, along with what happened to him. We'll hear all that from someone who loved him very much.
Before we begin, let's take a moment to speak about the substance that killed him, and the structure by which that substance is funneled into communities across the United States. We will include links to our sources for this information, namely the Drug Enforcement Administration and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, first synthesized by Belgian physician Paul Janssen in 1959. Fentanyl first arrived in the United States in 1968 and was then used as a general anesthetic. Even today, it can be used legally in medical settings for pain management or sedation. But this drug is more known today because of its role in the epidemic of synthetic opioid deaths in the United States.
The first community to deal with addiction issues around fentanyl was the medical community itself. decades before it became a major public health issue. But according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, fentanyl has played the biggest role in the wider opioid epidemic since 2016. That's because it's cheap and more accessible for dealers, which was important once it became harder to get certain prescription drugs. Today, there's an international pipeline for this drug to sate demand in the United States. Entities in China develop fentanyl precursors, which then make their way to Mexican drug cartels, who then manufacture fentanyl and smuggle it into the United States. From there, it's trafficked all around and sold locally, pressed into pills, and it takes many different forms on the street.
Fentanyl is highly potent and is often mixed into other drugs like heroin or cocaine. It takes very little fentanyl to kill a person. Now, everyone's different because we're talking about illegal narcotics. There's no quality control. All of this makes fentanyl quite uniquely dangerous.
This has become such a big problem that we actually think it's important for everyone to know the signs of an opioid overdose. Those include loss of consciousness, pinpoint pupils, slow or non-existent breathing, cold, clammy, or discolored skin. Medicines like naloxone or Narcan can save a person experiencing a fentanyl overdose. This drug is so powerful, though, that sometimes multiple hits of Narcan are needed to prevent death.
Preventative measures like education are also quite important. Fentanyl affects many people who are already drug addicts who know what they're taking. But with the advent of fentanyl-laced pills, it also affects people, especially young people, who might believe they're taking another drug entirely, or who may not be fully aware of the dangers of fentanyl. We feel that fentanyl deaths are somewhat undercovered in the true crime space, which tends to focus on more traditional homicide deaths. But we also believe that our audience is more likely to lose a loved one or know someone affected by this epidemic than to deal with a murder in their own lives. So we want to talk about this.
Let's get into the legality surrounding this drug. Indiana's law on dealing in a controlled substance resulting in death went into effect in 2018. That's highly relevant for fentanyl. Here's what that law says. A person who knowingly or intentionally manufactures or delivers a controlled substance or controlled substance analog in violation of dealing in cocaine or a narcotic drug, dealing in methamphetamine, manufacturing methamphetamine, or dealing in a Schedule 1, 2, or 3 controlled substance, that when the controlled substance is used, injected, inhaled, absorbed, or ingested, results in the death of a human being who used the controlled substance, commits dealing in a controlled substance resulting in death, a Level 1 felony. B. A person who knowingly or intentionally manufactures or delivers a controlled substance, that when the controlled substance is used, injected, inhaled, absorbed, or ingested, results in the death of a human being who used the controlled substance, commits dealing in a controlled substance resulting in death, a Level 2 felony. C. A person who knowingly or intentionally manufactures or delivers a controlled substance involving a synthetic drug lookalike substance, a controlled substance analog, or a substance represented to be a controlled substance, that when the controlled substance is used, injected, inhaled, absorbed, or ingested, results in the death of a human being who used the controlled substance, commits dealing in a controlled substance resulting in death, a Level 3 felony. D. It is not a defense to an offense described in the section that the human being died. 1. After voluntarily using, injecting, inhaling, absorbing, or ingesting a controlled substance or controlled substance analog, or 2. As a result of using the controlled substance or controlled substance analog in combination with alcohol or another controlled substance or with any other compound, mixture, diluent, or substance. So that law is basically saying that even though a person might have taken some kind of illicit drug, knowingly, willingly, that doesn't matter. If they die, whoever gave it to them may be on the hook, legally speaking, and may be facing felony charges. But of course, it's one thing to have a law on the books. It's another thing to enforce that law against a tide of addiction and illicit substances and people caught up in this drug trade and our broken healthcare system. We want to unpack a lot of this. This episode will launch our new ongoing series, The Fentanyl Files. We'll be striving to talk to figures on all sides of the issue. prosecutors and defense attorneys, police investigators, mental health and medical professionals, community advocates, those with a history of selling or taking these drugs, surviving loved ones of people lost to this crisis. So this is just the beginning. We want to shine a spotlight on the crisis from a variety of angles. So if you have a story, reach out. My name is Anya Cain. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
And this is The Murder Sheet.
We're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into murder cases. We're The Murder Sheet.
And this is The Fentanyl Files, Zachary's story.
At the beginning of this episode, we mentioned that we are going to be speaking with someone who loves Zachary very much. That person is his aunt, Melanie Pochek. She's an elementary school administrator, a smart and passionate person with a strong connection to her family. Their lives were forever altered when Zachary died after taking a fentanyl-laced pill.
Since Zachary's death, Melanie has immersed herself in studying the fentanyl crisis. She wants to share what she and her loved ones have gone through to educate other families before tragedy strikes. Melanie, before we get started about what happened, can you tell us about Zachary, just what he was like?
Well, I apologize that I'm getting emotional already. Zachary, aside from my son, Jack, Zachary was the light of my life. We spent a lot of time together when he was younger. Almost every weekend, he would be at my house in some capacity. And even like in the recent years, I have been, working with my dad to try to make sure that he was well taken care of. Zachary loved, when he was little, he loved Cars the movie. He always would ask, with Lightning McQueen, he would always ask, can we watch Cars the Newbie, he would say. And he just loved, he wanted to collect every single one of those. Can we go to Target? Target was like his other big thing. Can we go to Target? He wanted to collect every single little toy figurine. And, Disney really knows how to get you because they had, the dirty Lightning McQueen. They had the super speed Lightning McQueen. And Zach had every one of them. He loved that. He was so smart. He excelled in school. He did, he was a little bit ornery, high energy. So he definitely displayed some behaviors in school that would probably be less desirable to have in your classroom as a teacher. But he was so smart. As he grew older, he was a magnet for babies, children. All of my cousins' children in our family loved to be with him. He was so funny, enjoyed music, and he was a deep thinker too. I just recently was reading through some old text messages. I love to read back on our conversations, and he just randomly one day was talking about the water supply and just like some pretty deep thinking about, our financial system and water and just all kinds of different things that he would be thinking about. He was so loving and compassionate, and most of all, he was funny. He had a great relationship with my dad, his papa, along with my son, his only cousin. And oftentimes he would text my son and I and just poke little jabs at Papa and kind of share funny things that were going on. And he just had a great sense of humor and seemed lighthearted in most areas. He was a great friend to his friends and he was a great nephew and great family member. And we loved everything about him and obviously missed him dearly.
He sounds like a great kid. I mean, just the way you're talking about him, the way your voice lights up talking about him is just,
I will say that all of the great things without him, there's hurdles, and he had, like I said, he had some behavior issues, and he had gotten into some trouble in high school, had pursued alternative education through the school. But again, he thrived in the capacity in which he could learn on his own. I remember one time he came back from an extended time away from school because of some behavior issues, and he was able to complete a semester of chemistry in 3 weeks on his own, and received an A+. So that just kind of goes to show you kind of where his level of intelligence was when he put his mind to things.
Absolutely. I mean, some kids are not going to be served by the traditional schooling, apparatus. That's just maybe not their personality, not where their strengths are. And, I think it sounds like he was thriving in his own way, educationally, just taking an alternate path. I guess, in terms of his hopes for the future, do you have a sense of sort of what he wanted to do as he's kind of, becoming a young adult?
He had graduated from high school before he passed. Mm-hmm. And most recently, he was talking about possibly going to flight school. That was something that was kind of intriguing to him. And we had looked into programs. We're in Northwest Indiana, so we had looked into some things at the Griffith Airport, but that was something that fascinated him. He would also often talk about wanting to own his own business. He had talked about construction a couple of times, and I encouraged him to possibly consider joining like Carpenters Union or some kind of trade. So that way he could learn the trade and do well, and then be able to, kind of branch out and start his own business. I believe that Zachary walked to his own beat and wanted to kind of work for himself, which is contradictory to the pilot thing. But I think he would have done really well owning his own business, working for himself, and having people, work with him.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kind of do things your own way a little bit. I mean, we own our business, so definitely I can relate. I loved your memories about watching Cars and Target. Do you have any standout memory that kind of comes to your mind when you think about Zachary now?
This is so silly, but the most recent, the standout memory that I have, I think about him every time that I pump gas, and this is so silly, but one day we were taking a little road trip. We were actually going to visit Zachary's mom, and it was Zach and my dad and I, and Zach was just like kind of ripping on my dad about funny things, which he did. They pushed each other's buttons all the time and kind of threw jabs at each other. And he was making fun of my dad. When you go to the gas station and maybe you fill up your tank and it gets to like $19.82, how you like try to get that last, like you get to $20, you want to round it up or whatever. So he was like talking about how my dad did that, and not that he just rounds up to $20, but he would like try to squeeze in an extra whole gallon. And he's like, yeah, Papa will be out there like shaking the car to make sure the gas goes down and squeeze more in it. And sure enough, we stopped at a gas station, and sure enough, my dad was doing that with the car. And Zach and I were sitting in the car just absolutely laughing hysterically about what Zach had said, 20 minutes prior. So now that's just something that I kind of chuckle to myself every time that I go to the gas station. And it seems like something so trivial and silly, but that is like the standout memory that I have of him.
I love that. He's like a prophet right there. And it speaks to, his observations and his sense of humor.
Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Bite, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Bite clear liners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces, plus they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you could pay with your HSA, FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
What makes a life a good one? Is it the adventure you have? Or the friends you find along the way? Maybe it's pursuing your passion while striving to protect, defend, and save what you believe in every single day. So what makes a life a good one? In the Coast Guard, we think it's all of the above and more. But you'll have to find out for yourself. Visit gocoastguard.com to learn more.
If you're a new parent, a bad day means you either ran out of coffee, diapers, patience, or all of the above. Stocking up on cold brew and deep breaths are all you. Hello Bello's got your baby's butt covered. Because Hello Bello believes all families deserve premium, affordable baby products. With their ultra-convenient diaper bundle subscription service that includes 7 packs of diapers and 4 packs of plant-based wipes, you'll never run out of supplies. Better yet, they're delivered to your door. Set, change, and cancel your delivery schedule whenever you want. If you're a parent, your to-do list is longer than all your baby's wake windows combined. Let Hello Bello take care of diaper runs until you're done potty training. It was named Best Diaper Subscription by New York Magazine and winner of the 2022 Good Housekeeping Parenting Award for a reason. Go to hellobello.com/Wondery to get 30% off your first customized bundle and a full-size freebie product of your choice. That's hellobello.com/Wondery to start bundling with 30% off your first order. Don't forget, that's hellobello.com/Wondery.
I wanted to ask, in terms of, you mentioned some of his struggles. Did he struggle with drugs at all? Was that something that was more experimental for him? Or, I'm sure that's stuff you kind of found out about afterwards. Any insights on that as far as his life?
I would say that I absolutely was aware that he had experimented with marijuana, smoking marijuana. I am not in any way advocating that. I'm in Indiana. It's illegal in Indiana. I'm not advocating that at all. But I also don't believe that it's that uncommon among students who are out of high school, that college age, to experiment with that. And again, not that I'm saying that it makes it right, but I didn't ever really consider that to be a red flag. In terms of pill usage, which is what ultimately caused Zachary to pass away, I know that people probably think that I'm naive thinking this, but I really don't think that he had done that. I saw him the Sunday before he passed away on a Thursday, and he did fall asleep on my couch, but didn't seem like he was under the influence of anything. So I do think that there was some drug use when I'm talking about drug use, I mean marijuana, but I don't really think that this situation with pills happened. This could have been his first time, or I would say the very short term prior to his passing.
Can you tell us what happened on January 19th, 2023?
Yes. So this actually starts on January 18th. Zach had some friends over. He lived with my dad, and my dad was taking care of him because his mother is currently incarcerated for some drug issues as well. So he lived with my dad. He's lived with my dad for, I would say, 10 or 11 years. My sister and Zach lived with him. And he had a few friends over, and my dad indicated that it was about 3 or 3:30 maybe in the morning. And my dad had fallen asleep in the chair downstairs, and he kind of heard Zach, they were getting loud, and it was way past time to wrap it up and go to bed. And my dad said, okay, Zach, you need to get these people out of here, and it's time, you need to get some sleep. So from what I understand, his friends went home. He went upstairs and went to sleep. My dad woke up in the morning and, went about his day. He was at home all day. When you go to sleep at 3:30 in the morning, or even a couple hours later after he shooed the people out of the house, it's not like a 19-year-old to be waking up bright and early. So my dad ended up, watching a little TV and taking a nap. And when he woke up from his nap, he thought that he needed to go upstairs and check on Zach. And the way my dad explained, he walked in and Zach was, Zach was sitting in his chair, in his desk chair with his computer, and his head was tilted back. His eyes were open. And my dad said that he touched his neck and knew right away that he had passed away. At that point, he went downstairs and called 911 and just explained that, he knew that he was already gone. But they, sent over the police. And at that point, I'm not sure what events transpired at that point. I'm an assistant principal, and I had worked a normal school day. I had an event after school, and I drove home. And I actually had called Zach on the way home. This was about 5:30 and didn't get an answer. I didn't think anything of it. My son was with his dad that night, and so I was home by myself and went to sleep relatively early. I'm an early riser, so early to bed as well. And I looked at I just happened to grab my phone and look at it, and my son said, he texted, "What's going on? Aunt Diana and Uncle Ernie are trying to get into the house and you're not answering." And my aunt and uncle had called and they had texted, and she said, come to the door and let me in. So I went downstairs and I opened the door. And as soon as I opened the door, I said, please tell me that there's nothing wrong with my dad. That was my first instinct. I thought that something was wrong with him. And she kind of like, I remember her pushing through the door and she said, your dad's okay, but Zachary passed away. And I just could not believe it in that moment that like my poor dad and my sister and just everyone, like my poor aunt and uncle that had to come over and deliver the news to me because they didn't want to tell me on the phone, like just absolutely collapsed and could not believe that Zach was gone. I just, for days afterwards, I just kept thinking like, this can't be real. This can't be real. And at that point I was able to go and they took me to see my dad and my brother, and we just cried and kind of made a game plan for the next day and how we would proceed with like arrangements and things like that, and just, you know, spending time together. And at that point, you know, we didn't know what had happened, but they did assume that it was some type of overdose.
I'm just so sorry for you and your family, Melanie, that you all went through this together. You can just hearing this story, you can hear the ripple effects of just this absolute tragedy and this loss of this young man and how it affects everybody in the family. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that there was an early assumption that this could have been some kind of overdose. When did it become clear, and how was that conveyed to your family that fentanyl had something to do and it had, you know, played this role in Zachary's death?
There were suspicions of fentanyl from the very beginning, just because it's such an epidemic in our country. One of Zachary's friends had contacted my dad. I'm not sure who contacted who first, if my dad said that he had passed away or what, or if he reached out because he couldn't get a hold of Zach. I'm not sure like the logistics of how that happened, but he said, I think that Zach had, and what I remember him saying is, I think Zach had a big pill. And I'm not really even sure what big pill meant, but at that point, I think that the investigator, the police officer, the detective that was on the scene, like was clued into the fact that that was kind of thrown about. And I think we just assumed that it was either, I don't know that we even said fentanyl at the beginning. I'm just not really sure that I remember that, but it was clear about 10 weeks after he passed, we got the autopsy and the toxicology report, and it was ruled as an accidental overdose, and he did test positive for fentanyl.
Did you even know what fentanyl was at that point?
I did. I have heard of fentanyl. I have read about fentanyl, and I feel like every time I open my news app on my phone, it's like X amount of pills seized from here, this many pounds of fentanyl powder seized. I feel like we hear about it all the time. I did not feel like it was something that would ever like affect me or my family, but I had heard of fentanyl prior to that.
And I want to kind of zoom out into some broader questions about fentanyl, and then we can go back to what happened to Zachary. But you yourself have really taken it upon yourself to familiarize yourself with this issue. Can you speak to that as part of being affected by what happened to Zachary?
Yeah, I do know that like just in this year alone, like almost 20 million fentanyl pills have been seized by the Drug Enforcement Administration. In addition to that, like 1,200 pounds of fentanyl powder. And when we're talking about like a deadly lethal dose of fentanyl, we're talking about like 2 milligrams is about that dose. And if you think of it in terms of like what that looks like, if you sharpened a pencil, that amount of fentanyl could fit on the tip of a pencil. So we're talking about a tiny, tiny bit of powder and all of these pills that have been seized and all of this powder that has been seized. When we talk about like what has been seized at this point in 2024, we're talking about like close to 70 million like lethal doses, which is so alarming. It's just so scary to think like if this is the amount that has been seized, how much more is still out there? I know that these are being sold in the form of pills that look like, in Zachary's case, it was a Percocet, but, you know, hydrocodone, any like Xanax, any kind of like benzodiazepine, opioid, people are manufacturing, you know, fake pills, and there's fentanyl in the pill. So it's just really alarming how I think easy it is for someone to get their hands on these, or also it's alarming to think that somebody could be, people have opioid use disorders and they could be seeking out, pain pills for legitimate pain. And they think that they're getting one thing, but turns out it's laced with fentanyl. I think it's just so scary. And I know the DEA has like one pill. I think the like slogan is like one pill can kill. And it really is true. Like it can be one pill. Like that's all it takes to end someone's life. And it's so scary to me.
It's terrifying. And so my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but fentanyl is essentially a synthetic opioid that's very, very dangerous. One question that people may be wondering is, if it's so dangerous and it's so potent, why are drug dealers and drug manufacturers even playing around with it, given that, it can kill very quickly and very easily, more so than many other drugs?
This is a question that I've had for a long time, even prior to Zach's passing. Like, why would you put fentanyl in some, I know like, even in our area right now, it's been linked to like cocaine, like it's people are lacing cocaine with it. And I just didn't understand, like, if you're a drug dealer and you're selling, like you're in the business of selling drugs, why would you sell something that could kill someone because you're losing a customer? That's what I've always thought in my mind.
Yeah, and bringing the heat down, you're bringing the police investigation around.
But I think what it is the intention is not to kill. I think when we're talking about like our local drug dealers, the intention is not to kill, but the intentional is to provide like a better high, I suppose, and get people hooked on this drug. I do believe, though, there is an intention to kill, like based on like where this is being exported in from. And I don't need to make this a political like thing. I know that we know that there are, fentanyl seizures at the border, coming through the border. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's from our southern border where it's coming. I think it could be overseas. It probably is manufactured overseas. But I think the point is to get a higher high, because then you have long-term customers that are addicted. They want to stay, they want to get that feeling. So I don't really think that like from our like local area, there's an to kill.
That makes sense. It's more of a reckless negligence sort of thing. And a business decision that goes very bad because it is so dangerous. Is it typical that people who are buying the fentanyl laced pills like are not even aware that that's what they're getting?
I believe that to be true, that you're not aware. You think that you're buying, like I said, a Percocet, a hydrocodone, a Xanax, and it's laced. Or you think you're buying cocaine and it's laced. I don't think that people are actively, I think there are some people that are actively seeking what they call pressed pills, and that is a pill that contains fentanyl. But I don't believe, I believe that there are many, many of these deaths that are occurring and people don't even know that they're laced with fentanyl.
Your family's had to go through the justice system side of this up until recently, and we'll talk more about the specifics of Zachary's case in a moment. But why is it so hard to enforce the laws around this and to get a conviction even, or have any consequences in a fentanyl-related death?
I think it's so hard because it's really hard to pinpoint who the person is that is obtaining these drugs for the person who ends up dying. I think that with things like, Snapchat and all of these weird ways of communicating that teenagers and kids use, where they believe, and actually it's not true. Like when you erase those things or they disappear, it's not really gone forever, but they believe that to be the case. I just don't think that I don't think that our law enforcement has the means by which to pursue every one of these cases. In our case, we're lucky that there was a great detective assigned to the case, and he was relentless in his, searching of the phone and the records and things like that to find out where Zachary got these pills. But even in terms of like finding who gave the pills to Zachary, like where did that person get the pills from? And where did they get, like, it's just so much bigger than like, not to say that it's not important to hold people accountable, because I do believe that it is, but it's so much bigger than just what we have here on our local like scale, I guess.
Yes, it's like a murder happens and it's horrifying, but typically, unless there's some sort of organized crime element, one person is responsible, or, two people, whatever, and that's it. But this is the situation where people are dying and there's like a chain of accountability or culpability rather.
And I think we get to a point too where like people are not going to like tell on the person that they got it from because they don't want there to be fallout for themselves or their family or whatever. So people would just rather stay quiet and kind of take the consequences as they may. So we never get to those like big fish, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned you had some very good investigators working on this case. Can you tell us about the investigation and what they uncovered and how they uncovered it?
I can. So obviously with my dad, finding Zachary, it was very hard for him to like be part of that. He was, cooperative, of course, but like, I think that I'm the person in our family, in our immediate family with my brother and sister and my dad that like kind of takes charge and I'm the caretaker of the family. And so I was in communication with the detective and my dad too, to an extent, but he just, at the beginning just kept saying, we're going to figure it out. We have his phone. It's going to take some time. But he spoke with me one day and I told him about an interaction that I had 4 days after Zach passed. His friends came over. There were 3 friends that came over and they had initially reached out to me via text. His very best friend was someone who had come to my house on Christmas many times. He was at my house swimming, like someone that I knew very well. And he reached out and said that they wanted to come over and show me some things and provide closure. They came to my house. I asked him, like straight up, do you know who? I said, do not tell me, but do you know who Zach got this pill from? And he said yes. And so that was something that I shared with the investigator and he pursued it. He did have Zach's phone. He was able to retrieve text messages, and I'm not sure, I don't really remember the mode by which they communicated. I think it was just like regular text message. And again, even regular text messages can be deleted. So this investigator, it took a few months, it took like 3 months until there was an arrest in the case, but he was able to pinpoint, when the pill was delivered, where he got the pill, how much the pill cost, who gave the pill. And interestingly enough, they were able to kind of triangulate the cell phone data to show that this person left his home, went to another location to get the pill, the phones linked up. There was a brief phone call that happened, some text messages following. And so that was really interesting to me to see like kind of the background, like the technical piece with the cell phone component, how they were able to like pinpoint that this person is actually the person that he got the pill from.
Wow, it sounds like they did a really commendable job. What agency was that was taking this on?
It was through Hammond Police Department. Detective Reardon, who I will never be able to say enough great things about. He was so patient with all of my phone calls and questions and things like that. He did a really great job. And then the person who was responsible for the cell phone was actually someone that I went to elementary school with, Detective Chris Godey. And they were just wonderful people.
That is wild that you went to elementary school with him. But that's, I mean, it just sounds like they really put the resources and the manpower necessary into looking into this, which is great. And unfortunately, I imagine that's not always the case in these cases.
There's a level of closure that comes with figuring out, really what really did happen. As soon as there was an arrest made in the case, the very next day I went to the county courthouse and got the probable cause affidavit and was able to read through the story of how the events transpired. That was really helpful to me. It invoked some feelings of anger for sure regarding the person that he got the pill from. And I can, delve more into that if you would like me to. But I was able to like read, I'm just like such an information gatherer, and being able to read like how things transpired was really helpful to me. And so again, I'm just so grateful for the work that the detectives did on this case.
Absolutely. I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us some of the information that was in that probable cause affidavit about the man who sold the pill to Zach?
So unfortunately, this is not just, I think this is the message that I'd like to send to like teenagers. I don't think that maybe teenagers listen to this, but their parents do and they can share this. The hardest thing in this whole case is that this was not some faceless person who sold Zach this pill. Zach, I have said a million times, is not absolved from any wrongdoing with this. Zach was seeking out a pill. He was seeking out a Percocet pill, and we have to share that he does have some responsibility. He did not have to seek out the pill. He did not have to take the pill. But the person who sold him the pill was his best friend, Presley. Presley and Zach were as thick as thieves. They met in first grade in the Munster schools. They were inseparable. Like I said, Presley had been to my house a number of times on the evenings on Christmas, swam. I know that he spent, oftentimes in the summer would come over or go over to Zach's house, and he would, be there for several days and just like hanging out. They were like brothers. They were so close. And so to know that this could happen as a result of something that you got from your best friend, I think that's really one of the scariest things for me. And one of the messages that I would like to send, like, it's not just a faceless drug dealer. It's not somebody in the back of an alley. This can be somebody that you are close to, that you've known forever, and that you love. They left each other like brothers. So that was really hard. I remember finding out that it was Presley who gave him the pill. My dad was planning to stop by my place of work, and he came in and he was crying. And I just said, what's wrong, Dad? And he said, well, I just got a call from Detective Reardon, and Presley was arrested for selling Zachary the drug. And we were just kind of shocked. I was also angry the day that Presley came over with their friends. He had told me part of the providing closure, as he indicated, was that he told me that he believed that Zach committed suicide. And we've later found out that the information that he showed me, they were some fabricated text messages and things like that, and it was not suicide. So I understand, looking back, that he was doing that to kind of cover his tracks. I think he knew that I'm a person that wants all the information, and I would be poking around if these investigators didn't. So I think that was like information that was given to me to kind of say, like, okay, back off, you know what happened. So I was absolutely shocked that Presley was the person that was going to be held accountable for this.
That's so horrifying. And I think you summed it up so well. Like, we want to think that the people who can harm us are just like bad or like, malevolent or intentionally trying to cause harm. But with a drug like fentanyl, where it's so potent and so dangerous, it really can be someone who doesn't want to hurt you and is close to you, but just is caught up in this drug world and just, it happens. But that is so scary. You can't, the trust that gets built up between friends, especially at that age, a horrible situation like this can happen.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I also need to say is that I don't believe that Presley did this intentionally. I don't believe that Presley thought that he was going to deliver this pill to Zach and he was going to wake up the next morning and Zach was going to have, not wake up the next morning, I guess is what I should say. I don't think that this was not intentional, and Zach did trust him. And I think they probably trusted each other too much.
What happened to Presley?
So Zach passed away on January 19th. 3 months later, on April 19th, Presley was charged with a level 1 felony, dealing a narcotic resulting in death. How it was explained to me that the only thing kind of higher than that in the state of Indiana would be like a murder charge. So with a level 1 felony, like what he was charged with, he was facing 20 to 30 years in prison. I think there have been 5 court cases besides his like initial hearing that I've attended. I've talked with the prosecutor, but he was charged with this felony and was working through a plea agreement. I don't believe that 20 to 30 years for this situation involving his best friend was appropriate. I don't believe that he should do time in the DOC. I am of the mindset that like the substance use disorders that we have in our country are not going to be solved by incarceration. They're going to be solved by rehabilitation, mental health services, just helping someone get to the root of the substance use disorder. So I had talked with the prosecutor, and I did believe that there needed to be some accountability. The last that I spoke with the prosecutor, they were working on a plea agreement. He probably would have pled down to a level 5 or level 6 felony. We were talking about maybe involuntary manslaughter, which I was comfortable with. I felt like that at least gave a charge that represented the fact that somebody's life had been taken. I will say that throughout this whole time, my dad has been very vocal about not wanting Presley to have a felony charge. He wanted him to be charged with a misdemeanor. He did not feel like he should have his life ruined with felony charges. I feel like that's important to say. I think the level of compassion that my dad had and still has is just remarkable. And I pray all the time that I can get to that point someday. I'm not there yet, but he just has been so forgiving and just so compassionate. I don't think that was a possibility in terms of like the justice system. They were not going to plead down to a misdemeanor charge.
But that is really incredible that your dad found that place of forgiveness.
Yes. Subsequently, the last time that I saw Presley was in court just a couple of weeks ago. We had not ever spoken since the day that he came to my house. He did send me a strand of text messages at one point in March after Zach passed, indicating that he was going to rehab and that he would contact me when he got back. When he got back, he was arrested. We have not talked when I've interacted with him in court. I've been seated on the opposite side of the courtroom as him. But I did feel that it was important for me to go there and kind of see what's happening with the case and talk with the prosecutor. But I received a call from my dad on Sunday of this week indicating that he had talked with Presley's mom and Presley was found dead on Sunday morning. Since then, we've had some conversations and it sounds like this is not confirmed, but his mom has indicated that she believes that it was death by suicide.
Oh, God.
She has shared that Presley had a balloon released when Zach passed, and he had these sweatshirts made with Zach's picture on the back and some buttons, like pins that you wear. And she had indicated that Presley passed wearing the sweatshirt with Zach's picture on it and had the button with him. She shared that he cried every day. He missed Zach terribly, and he just couldn't go on. And so that is so heartbreaking. I have been vocal about the need for him to, have some type of consequence. I wrote a victim impact statement several months ago. And one of the things that I said is that I didn't believe that the, 20 to 30 year sentence was appropriate because he did have a life sentence and it was something that he had to think about every single day. And so unfortunately, this is just a tragic story all the way around.
Absolutely. I mean, just the idea that another young man now has died, possibly over the guilt he felt.
Yes. And it sounds like it sounds like he used a fentanyl pill as well to do this. We obviously won't have confirmation of that until toxicology comes back and things like that, but that is what is suspected.
I mean, it just underscores how much of a scourge fentanyl is. The fact that this had such what was already a huge tragedy then had perhaps the most tragic outcome, even after there was some insight into what happened.
I agree. And it's so unnecessary.
Oh, geez. I wanted to ask you, would you be willing to read your victim impact statement on the show now that unfortunately there's not really going to be an opportunity to do so otherwise?
I would, and I would say that I am aware, after Presley passed, I reflected upon this and there's a point in this where I expressed some anger and I felt like it was appropriate, to I didn't want to tweak this after he passed, just because I knew we were recording today. So this, I wrote probably, at the end of last year, the beginning of this year. So it's been a couple of months, but I would love to read it. I was planning on saying this in court on his sentencing date. Presley, there are two dates that I replay in my mind on a daily basis. January 19th, the day I found out the devastating news that my dear nephew's life had been taken too soon. On that day and the days following, I wrestled how I would tell his mother that her only child was gone. I tried thinking of how I would have to tell my son that his cousin was no longer here to laugh with him, support him at his football games, and commiserate with him about all things family related. I sobbed for days thinking of my dad, Zach's papa, finding his grandson's lifeless body and thinking of how he was hurting so deeply as the child who lived with him for well over a decade was gone forever. I cried thinking of my dad watching his son, his two daughters, and his grandson grieve the loss of our Zachary and deal with his own grief as well. I cried for my sweet angel Zachary and couldn't imagine how we would ever be able to go on without him. The other date is exactly 3 months later, April 19th. I vividly remember my dad walking into my office to tell me that you had been charged as a result of Zachary's death. He was crying when he told me. I immediately cried for you too. I felt such an immense sadness knowing you were sitting in a jail cell when you had just lost your best friend since third grade 3 months before. And then I became angry. This is a type of anger I've never experienced and one that I've had to work very hard to keep at bay. I was sad for you, but furious because you knew the whole time what happened to Zach and every detail that went along with it. I was angry because of your lies to cover up what you knew about his death. You came over to my house 4 days after Zach passed and told me with certainty that he died by suicide. You showed me the text messages that I only now know were fabricated, which indicated that Zach wanted to die and that he ended his own life. None of that was true. You sat with me while I cried. I fed you and your friends dinner, and you told my son you'd look out for him since he no longer has a living cousin. You knew in that moment that your actions, along with Zach's choices, of course, took his only cousin and my only nephew. For 10 whole weeks until receiving the autopsy and toxicology report, and even several weeks more when the truth about your involvement was uncovered. I lived in absolute agony, not understanding how I couldn't see the signs that Zachary wanted to take his own life. I lived with guilt that I should have picked up on the signs. I should have done more. I should have left him harder. That's 70 days of crying and deep depression that were not only caused by Zach's actions, but exacerbated by you and your actions. And yet, Presley, in spite of all that, the night of April 19th, I prayed for you again. I prayed for Zach. I prayed for your mom and his. I prayed for your dad and my dad. I prayed for your family and mine, and for the friends of you and Zachary who would be touched by the circumstances surrounding his death yet again. We had already lost our baby, and now your family could potentially be losing theirs too, albeit to the criminal justice system. The Bible says an eye for an eye. Some might say one life lost. In this case, Zach can only be repaid with another life lost, this time via your incarceration. Zach can no longer go on to live his life, so why should you be able to continue about your daily life as you have? The only thing I can lean on is that through faith, I've been taught to love and forgive. And I also believe that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Your Honor, as you contemplate the sentence of Presley for delivering a controlled substance that resulted in the unnecessary, devastating death of my nephew Zachary, I ask that you have mercy on him. I know Zach would not want Presley to spend an extended amount of time in prison, or any time at all for that matter, and I don't believe that's appropriate in these circumstances. As an elementary school administrator and parent, I know that if I take away a child's recess, or put my own child in timeout, that does little good. I have more of an impact if I counsel, encourage, support, and provide interventions that get to the heart of the matter. In Presley's case, substance use disorder and reckless behavior, both of which I believe can be overcome with substance abuse education, intensive mental health and grief counseling, and a lengthy probation period in which the use of drugs is prohibited, and running with a new and different group of supportive friends is encouraged. I would really like to emphasize the need for mental health counseling, especially focusing on grief. In the end, no matter what you decide, Presley will be given a life sentence, one that we cannot give or take away. His life sentence is having to wake up every day and remember that his actions unintentionally took the life of his childhood best friend. Presley, I hope you think about Zachary every single day. I don't want you to think about January 18th and 19th, though. I want you to think about the 7,259 days that preceded that. I hope that Zach's memory, as well as his loss, can help you stay clean. I hope you honor him, not by taking a pill, smoking, or drinking, but by getting your life together and being an advocate for people in your situation and in Zach. I hope you can live a life of love, not one of bitterness and contempt. I know our family will do the same. Nothing we ever do will bring Zach back, but you have the opportunity to honor him and create a legacy of your own by positively impacting our community. You alone cannot solve all the problems surrounding fentanyl crisis or substance use disorders, but talking about it and about Zach can ensure that people you encounter learn from this mistake and that they don't allow it to happen. You can also inspire others with your story of Zach so that it is prevented in part because of you. You have the potential to save lives. I forgive you, Presley. I love you, and I wish you a successful recovery and a life of peace. That's what my family wants. That's what I want, and I know that's what Zach would want.
That was incredibly powerful, Melanie, and I'm just very sorry that you never got a chance to convey that to Presley.
I do wish that he would have heard that. I wish I would have said it to him sooner, but I think that the message that I'm hoping that I can share is that it's more than just, this drug use. It's more than just like sending somebody away. There are other, means by which we can help this crisis. And I also although I had, and still probably to an extent have so much anger, like love and forgiveness is really what counts. And that's really what's going to make the difference in our
it was just beautiful. And just, yeah, that's just incredibly powerful. I'm sorry, I'm emotional.
Sorry.
No, it was, yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying though speaks to how maybe some families do find a way out of this, the devastating effects of this crisis, and maybe how we can kind of come together to try to combat it, family by family and case by case, because it seems like systemic change is elusive at this point.
It does. And I think that being vocal about it, for me, it's been so important. I'm sure that there are people who want me to stop talking about my experience with fentanyl, my experience with losing my nephew, but I just feel so compelled to talk about it all the time because there's such a stigma surrounding substance use disorder that I just want people to know that they're not alone. And if I can share this story with somebody who, maybe they know someone who's going through the same thing or lost someone, and they can say, oh, I know this person at my school, or this person that I work with, or this person, in my community, and she'll talk to you. Like, I am so happy to talk to anybody about this. And I just want people to know that they're not alone. And I would love to be able to somehow impact our community to erase the stigma behind substance use disorder. And I think my focus is not so much on people who are using drugs, but the people that are surrounding the people that are using drugs, and just being a supportive person, because I know how hard this is. Unfortunately, this is not my only issue or my only situation in my life that has surrounded like drug use. But I also have my sister who's currently incarcerated for some substance abuse, and then somebody else who I love dearly he's in recovery from substance use disorder. But I've experienced, coming back from a number of non-fatal overdoses. I've been part of that support team as well. And so unfortunately, my experiences are great in number, and I feel like I can advocate for people who have been in or will be in my.
Absolutely. And I think what people need to understand is that while Zachary's loss is unique and uniquely painful for your family, what happened to your family is not unique. This is absolutely something that is ongoing for many people and will continue to happen. And when people are staying silent because of a stigma, or not wanting to be judged, or not wanting to have people say, well, they were an addict, so, that's what happens, then the worse it gets, because people are not equipped to deal with it, or to see the signs, or to try to intervene and educate children, before they even get into a situation like this.
I agree. And that's the thing. I just want people to know that although there's a stigma surrounding it, you are not alone. There's unfortunately so many of us in this club that we have not chosen to be a part of. And I would encourage people to reach out and talk about their situation and lean on people. I am so grateful for my family, my friends, my coworkers, and the support system that I have. And I just hope that I'm able to pay it forward for what they all have done for me, in the future with someone else.
I have a few big picture questions to sort of wrap it up. One is, what changes do you feel could be made to our justice system or laws or anything like that could better help families reeling from a fentanyl-related death, or could even prevent deaths?
I have a lot of strong feelings about the justice system, one of which is that I, again, don't believe that incarceration is the answer for people who are caught in possession of drugs or who are dealing drugs. I really believe that there's a different mode by which we can rehabilitate. And I wish that we could pursue that. I do know that in Lake County, which is where I live, there is drug court, which is an extensive program. I don't know all of the ins and outs of it, but I know that people who are in recovery but have been charged with some type of crime, they report to drug court, and they have to, frequently take drug tests. They have to hold down a job. They have to be held accountable for their daily actions. And I think that is a step in the right direction. However, I wish we could intervene prior to getting involved with the criminal justice system. I think that the mental health resources in our area at least, and probably, nationwide, are just not what we need it to be. I know that in terms of like a medical assisted detox facility, the closest one to where I live is about an hour or so away, the closest one in Indiana, where you can actually have inpatient detox. I just think that we kind of need to amp up some of those things so that we can get to a point where we're not headed in the direction of the criminal justice system, and where we can intervene prior to that.
That makes sense.
I know that there are a number of harm reduction initiatives, including, clean syringes for people who are using drugs intravenously. I know that they're like naloxone, which is an opioid antagonist. You give it to someone if they're having an overdose, and it's able to reverse the effects of opioid. That is available in some areas. I know you can go to a pharmacy and get it, but there are dispensaries and machines that will dispense these in some communities. And I just think compassion and understanding and not stigmatizing people who have substance use disorder will go a long way in helping them feel that they can, seek treatment and seek help when they're ready to do so.
You mentioned that you're now sort of in a club that you never wanted to be a part of. I wonder what advice you would have to other people who suddenly find themselves in this tragic situation.
I think for me, like reading and obtaining as much information as I can has been helpful, but also connecting with other people. I don't know anyone else who has, experienced the situation that we have with someone so close providing the pill. I do work with a person who lost her brother to an overdose, and she has been just a wonderful source of support for me. Sometimes I just need to say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Like, did you experience this? And she's just been wonderful. Another coworker who, has a situation that I won't talk about on here, but she's been a great person. And, again, people who their lives have not been touched by drugs at all that I've been able to kind of talk to. I just think you have to lean on the people that are around you and know that people love and care for you. I think in any situation when someone passes away, you're bombarded with love and support, in those initial days and weeks to come. But it's a couple months down the line, and it's 6 months down the line, and it's a year down the line. And I would say just continuing to reach out for support. And also, if you haven't experienced this, just supporting the people that have. That has been probably the most impactful for me, has been my relationships with other people.
In terms of the immense grief that you felt since Zachary's passing, how do you cope? How do you live with that? How do you kind of keep Zachary's memory alive, even though he's not here anymore, to kind of reach all those milestones going into his 20s because of this tragedy?
I think this is the hardest part for me. My son is 15, and he is at the point where many 15-year-olds are, where he doesn't really want to react emotionally. He doesn't want to talk about things. But I'm, as you probably picked up on, a talker, and I want to process and I want to talk about it. And I have plenty of people to do that with. But we do some things to honor Zach. Zach loved Portillo's cake. And so on his birthday, the first year that he passed, and on the anniversary of his death, we had Portillo's cake. So we do, little things like that. But I think for me, part of the grief process that has been so hard to just process is the fact that I feel like not that I have to think about Zach every day. I want to think about Zach every day, but I feel like I have to be sad about it every day, because if I'm not doing something to actively talk about him, then his memory is not going to go on. And I feel like if I'm not talking about him or thinking about him, like, how do I know that someone else is? And I just want him to be thought about, every single day. And I think that that's really hard. It's hard to we're 13 months past this, and I don't think that there's been a day that I haven't cried about him or missed him. And I know that grief is a process, and people told me right away, like, you'll never get over it, but it will get easier. And for a long time, I felt like that was a lie, and sometimes I still do. It doesn't really get easier, but it just gets I think it just gets easier to cope with a little bit. Like, I can have a conversation, clearly not today without crying, but in many aspects and many, times I'm able to have a conversation without crying. But I'm just so deeply emotionally touched by his passing and knowing that I'm never going to see him again, that it sometimes seems impossible to go on. And again, I'm just so grateful for the people that surround me and that have loved me through this.
Melanie, we just so appreciate you and the work you're doing to kind of help other people who might be going through this by speaking on it. And I'm just so sorry again. But we appreciate you. Is there anything we didn't ask you about that you wanted to mention?
I think that I just want to emphasize again, like the naloxone. I think that that's something that many people might not know about. And I would encourage people who, have loved ones in their care that have opioid use disorder. I would encourage people to have those on hand, to seek it out from a pharmacy or one of the places that dispenses those. I think that that's something to have on hand that really could save lives. Business owners, people who are just kind of traveling about the community, you don't have to know someone who used opioids to have that in your possession and potentially save a life. And that's something that I would like to emphasize.
Absolutely. And everyone as a community can take a part in this and possibly spare a family from losing somebody.
Yeah. I just want to thank you both for bringing some awareness to this. And it just seems such a massive endeavor to make any impact on it. But again, my message has been to talk about it and spread the word and hope that, what we do and what we talk about will impact and, help others in the future. So thank you so much for bringing an awareness to this on your podcast.
Absolutely. And thank you again, Melanie. This has been great. And we just appreciate you sharing this with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.
We want to sincerely thank Melanie. We are so sorry for what she and her family have gone through and for what all families who've lost a loved one this way go through. Our hearts go out to Presley Martinez de Young's family as well. The fact that fentanyl took these two young lives away is just a horrendous tragedy. We hope that if you happen to have any young people in your life, you take a bit of time to maybe talk to them. It's normal for young people to experiment with illicit substances, but fentanyl is a unique danger. It could make a single mistake a lethal one.
Thanks so much for listening to the Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for the Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.